I never thought I would end up in a legal battle with my own homeowners association. But when I received a certified letter from Patricia Ashford, HOA president of Willow Creek Estates in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, I knew my peaceful life was about to get complicated. My name is Frank Quincy, and I have lived at 4782 Meadowlark Drive for 8 years. I am a software engineer who works from home, and I bought this 3-bedroom ranch-style house specifically because the neighborhood seemed quiet and well-maintained. The HOA fees were reasonable at $200 quarterly, and the board seemed competent enough to keep the common areas looking decent without being too intrusive. That changed about 18 months ago when Patricia took over as president. Patricia was everything you would expect from a middle-aged HOA tyrant. She had the signature haircut, the kind that screamed for the manager at every target within a 50-mile radius. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a personalized plate that read Rules 1 cent, and wore yoga pants with bedazzled pockets, despite never setting foot in an actual gym. Her mission, as she stated at every monthly meeting, was to make Willow Creek Estates the most prestigious community in the greater Phoenix metropolitan area. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing code for a client project, when I heard heavy machinery outside my window. My home office faced the greenbelt area that ran behind my property, a narrow strip of common land that separated my backyard fence from the main power lines that serviced our entire neighborhood. I walked to the window and saw 2 excavators tearing up the desert landscaping. I grabbed my phone and headed outside, confused about what construction project could possibly be happening without any notice to the homeowners. The greenbelt was maybe 40 feet wide, running the entire length of our street and the parallel street behind us. It was mostly natural desert vegetation, with a few transplanted palo verde trees and some decorative rocks. More importantly, I knew from my property survey that this area contained utility easements for Arizona Power and Light, the company that supplied electricity to our community. "Excuse me," I called out to one of the construction workers, a Hispanic man in his 50s wearing a hard hat and safety vest. "What are you building here?" He consulted his clipboard. "Playground equipment. According to this work order, your HOA contracted us to install a community play area. Should be done in about 2 weeks." My stomach dropped. "Did anyone verify the easements?" He shrugged. "Not my department, buddy. We just build what we are told to build. You would have to talk to whoever hired us." I pulled out my phone and dialed Patricia's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Patricia, this is Frank Quincy from 4782 Meadowlark. I am standing in the greenbelt behind my house watching construction equipment tear up the utility easement. Please call me back immediately. This seems like a serious legal issue." No response came that day or the next. I attended the HOA board meeting that Thursday night, held in the community clubhouse near the neighborhood entrance. About 30 residents showed up, which was more than usual. Apparently, word had spread about the playground project. Patricia stood at the front of the room, flanked by the other board members. Todd Brennan, the vice president who owned a car dealership, Monica Wheeler, the treasurer who taught kindergarten, and George Santos, the secretary who was retired from the Postal Service. Patricia wore a bright pink blazer and had printed out glossy color renderings of the proposed playground. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia began with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I am thrilled to share our exciting new community enhancement project. As you may have noticed, construction has begun on a state-of-the-art playground facility in the Greenbelt area. This will include swings, slides, climbing structures, and even a small splash pad for the summer months. This represents a significant investment in our community's future and will surely increase all of our property values. I raised my hand immediately. Patricia, did you check the utility easements before starting construction? Her smile faltered. Frank, always the pessimist. Yes, we did our due diligence. Can you show me the documentation? Because I reviewed my property deed when I bought my house, and I am pretty certain that entire Greenbelt area is covered by an exclusive easement for Arizona Power and Light. Patricia's face reddened. The board reviewed all relevant documents and determined that the playground location is perfectly acceptable. We do not need to justify every decision to every homeowner who thinks they know better. I am not trying to be difficult, I said, keeping my voice calm. I am trying to prevent the HOA from making a costly mistake. Utility easements are serious legal agreements. The power company has the right to access that land at any time, and they can require the removal of any structures that interfere with their equipment or access. Todd Brennan spoke up. Listen, Frank, we appreciate your concern, but Patricia is right. We had our HOA attorney review everything. The playground is far enough from the actual power lines that it does not pose any problems. Did the attorney actually contact Arizona Power and Light? I pressed. Monica Wheeler sighed. Frank, we are trying to do something nice for the community. Families with children will really benefit from this amenity. Why are you so determined to oppose progress? That was the thing about HOA boards. They heard any questioning of their decisions as personal attacks rather than legitimate concerns. I tried one more time. I am not opposing anything. I am asking if anyone contacted the utility company for approval. That is standard procedure for construction on an easement. Patricia slammed her hand on the podium. This discussion is over. The project has been approved by the board and construction will continue as scheduled. If you have such a problem with it, Frank, perhaps you should consider living somewhere else. The meeting moved on to other topics, but I could barely concentrate. After it ended, I approached George Santos, who seemed like the most reasonable board member. He was in his 70s, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. George, can I ask you something off the record? He glanced around nervously. Sure, Frank. What is on your mind? Did Patricia actually have an attorney review the easement issue? George hesitated. Between you and me, I raised the same concern you did. Patricia insisted she had checked everything, but I never saw any documentation. Todd and Monica backed her up, so I was outvoted. I am just the secretary. I take notes and keep records. Did anyone contact Arizona Power and Light? Not that I am aware of. Patricia said it was unnecessary because the playground would not touch the actual power line poles. I thanked George and drove home, my mind racing. The next morning, I called Arizona Power and Light customer service and explained the situation. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone in their easement management department, a woman named Sarah Chen. Let me pull up our records for your address, Sarah said. I could hear typing in the background. Yes, we have an exclusive 50-foot easement running along that entire corridor. The easement was granted when the subdivision was developed in 1998. Any construction within the easement requires written approval from our engineering department. Has anyone from the Willow Creek Estates, HOA, contacted you about building a playground? More typing. No, I am not showing any permit applications or inquiries from that entity. When did construction begin? 3 days ago. They are installing playground equipment, including structures that require concrete foundations. Sarah's tone shifted from professional to concerned. That is a serious violation. Those easements exist so we can maintain and access our equipment without obstruction. If we have an emergency or need to upgrade infrastructure, we cannot have permanent structures in the way. I need to escalate this immediately. Can I have your contact information?" I provided my phone number and email, and Sarah promised someone would be in touch within 24 hours. True to her word, I received a call the next afternoon from Bradley Morrison, a regional manager for Arizona Power and Light. He had a deep voice and spoke with the authority of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. "Mr. Quincy, I have reviewed the situation with our legal team. This is indeed our easement, and no approval was granted for any construction. We are going to send an official notice to your HOA board demanding immediate cessation of construction and removal of any structures already installed. They will have 30 days to comply. What happens if they refuse? Then we will pursue legal action and potentially seek injunctive relief. We take easement violations very seriously. These easements are crucial for public safety and infrastructure maintenance. Can you provide me with the names and contact information for your HOA board members?" I gave him Patricia's information as the president, and Bradley thanked me for bringing this to their attention. He mentioned that they would also be sending a representative to inspect the site and document the violations. That Friday, 2 men in Arizona Power and Light trucks showed up at the Greenbelt. They took photographs, measured distances, and consulted documents on their tablets. The construction crew, looking nervous, stopped work and called someone on their phones. Within an hour, Patricia arrived in her Lexus, practically screeching into the parking area. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, storming over to the utility workers. "You have no right to stop our construction project." The older of the 2 men, who wore a badge identifying him as a senior field engineer, remained calm. "Madam, are you affiliated with the Homeowners Association? I am the president, and you are trespassing on HOA property. Actually, madam, you are building on our easement. This 50-foot corridor is owned by Arizona Power and Light through a permanent easement granted in 1998. No construction is permitted without our express written approval, which was never requested or granted." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "That is ridiculous. This is common area land that belongs to the HOA. We can do whatever we want with it." The engineer pulled out a tablet and showed her a digital map. "The easement is clearly marked on all subdivision plats and property deeds. You can own the surface land, but the easement gives us exclusive rights for utility infrastructure and access. Any structures you build here can be removed at our discretion, and you will be liable for all costs." "I will sue," Patricia threatened. "This is harassment." "That is your prerogative, madam. In the meantime, you are receiving official notice that all construction must cease immediately, and all structures must be removed within 30 days. The formal letter will arrive via certified mail within 3 business days." I watched this exchange from my backyard, feeling vindicated but also worried about what Patricia might do next. She was not the type to admit mistakes or back down gracefully. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing on my porch, her expression a mixture of rage and forced politeness. "Frank, we need to talk." "Come in," I said, though I regretted it immediately. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning my living room like she was looking for code violations. "I know you called the power company." I raised a legitimate concern at the board meeting, and no one would listen. I had a responsibility to make sure the HOA was not making a serious mistake. "A serious mistake," Patricia laughed bitterly. "You have sabotaged a project that would have benefited the entire community. Do you have any idea how much money we have already spent? The planning, the permits from the city, the construction contract. That is all wasted now because you could not mind your own business. I saved the HOA from an even bigger disaster, I countered. If you had finished the playground and then the power company forced you to tear it down, you would have spent even more money, not to mention the potential lawsuit for violating the easement. Our attorney said it was fine. Did your attorney actually review the easement documents? Did they contact Arizona Power and Light? Patricia's silence was answer enough. I continued, I am guessing you did not want to spend money on a thorough legal review, so you just assumed it would be fine. That is not due diligence, Patricia. That is negligence. How dare you, she hissed. I have given countless hours of volunteer service to this community. I do not need some antisocial computer nerd questioning my judgment. I am not antisocial, and this is not personal. This is about following the rules, which is ironic coming from someone whose license plate says Rules 1SD. That was probably not the smartest thing to say. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You have just made an enemy, Frank. I promise you will regret this. She stormed out, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, wondering what I had just set in motion. The certified letter from Arizona Power and Light arrived the following Tuesday, addressed to the HOA board. I knew about it because Patricia forwarded a copy to all homeowners, along with a bitter message blaming me for the situation. The letter was formal and unambiguous. All construction must cease immediately. All installed structures must be removed within 30 days, and failure to comply would result in legal action, and the HOA being held liable for all costs associated with removal and any damages to utility infrastructure. The next HOA board meeting was packed. Over 60 residents showed up, which was probably a record for Willow Creek Estates. People were angry, confused, and looking for someone to blame. Patricia wasted no time pointing the finger directly at me. This disaster is the direct result of Frank Quincy's interference, she announced from the podium. We had a beautiful playground under construction that would have enhanced our community and increased property values. But because Frank decided to sabotage the project by calling the power company, we now have to tear it all down and eat the costs. That is not what happened, I said loudly from my seat. I raised a legitimate concern about the utility easement at the last meeting, and the board ignored it. I contacted the power company because no one else bothered to verify whether the construction was legal. A woman in the front row, Jennifer Ellis, who had 2 young children, stood up. I do not understand. Why is the power company allowed to dictate what we do with our own land? I stood again. It is not our land, not really. The easement was part of the original subdivision agreement. The power company needs guaranteed access to their lines for maintenance and emergencies. If they allowed everyone to build whatever they wanted on easements, it would compromise the entire electrical grid. Patricia interrupted. Frank is not a lawyer. He has no idea what he is talking about. Our attorney approved this project. Then let's hear from your attorney, I suggested. Can you have them explain why they approved construction on a utility easement without contacting the utility company? The room fell silent. Todd Brennan cleared his throat. Our attorney provided general guidance on HOA authority over common areas. The specific issue of the easement may not have been brought to their attention. So no one actually checked, another homeowner, Marcus Thompson, said from the back. How much money did the HOA spend on this playground? Monica Wheeler consulted her notebook. The total project budget was $85,000. We have spent approximately $42,000 so far, including planning, permits, and initial construction. The room erupted in angry voices. People demanded to know how the board could have been so careless, why they had not done proper research, and who would be held accountable. Patricia tried to regain control, but she had lost the room. "We will pursue legal action against Arizona Power and Light," she declared. "They have no right to interfere with community improvements." "That is throwing good money after bad," I said. "The easement is ironclad. It has been on record for nearly 30 years. You will lose, and you will waste even more HOA funds on legal fees." George Santos spoke up for the first time. "I think we need to accept reality. We made a mistake, and we need to fix it as efficiently as possible. Can we negotiate with the construction company to get some of our money back?" "Absolutely not," Patricia snapped. "We are going to fight this." But Patricia was outnumbered now. Other board members and residents pushed back, arguing that the HOA could not afford a prolonged legal battle with a major utility company. Eventually, Todd Brennan made a motion to halt all legal action against Arizona Power and Light and to begin removing the playground structures to comply with the notice. Monica seconded it, and even though Patricia voted against it, the motion passed 3-2. Over the next 2 weeks, the construction company returned to dismantle what they had built. It was depressing to watch the excavators tear out the concrete foundations and haul away the partially assembled playground equipment. Each day felt like a physical manifestation of wasted money and poor decision-making. Patricia, meanwhile, ramped up her campaign against me. She filed a complaint with the HOA alleging that I had violated community rules by allowing my grass to exceed the permitted height by half an inch. She sent me a violation notice for leaving my trash, cans visible from the street, 15 minutes past the designated time on collection day. She even tried to fine me for having a non-approved shade of beige paint on my window shutters, despite the fact that I had not repainted anything in 5 years. I documented everything, keeping copies of all correspondence and taking time-stamped photographs. I also started attending every single HOA board meeting and asking detailed questions about expenditures and decision-making processes. Other homeowners, emboldened by the playground disaster, began doing the same. It turned out that the playground was not Patricia's only questionable decision. During one meeting in April, Marcus Thompson asked about a $20,000 expense listed simply as landscaping enhancement. Monica Wheeler, looking uncomfortable, explained that Patricia had contracted a company to replace all the existing desert landscaping at the community entrance with imported Italian cypress trees and an elaborate fountain. "Did the board vote on this?" Marcus asked. George Santos checked his notes. "There was a general vote to improve the entrance aesthetics, but the specific plan and budget were left to Patricia's discretion." $20,000 seems excessive for landscaping, another homeowner, Robert Chen, observed. "Did we get multiple quotes?" Patricia bristled. "I selected a reputable company that does work for luxury resorts. We cannot cut corners if we want Willow Creek Estates to be competitive with other high-end communities." "But we are not a high-end community," Jennifer Ellis said. "We are a middle-class subdivision. Most of us bought here because it was affordable." The meeting devolved into another heated argument about Patricia's spending priorities and lack of fiscal responsibility. I stayed quiet for most of it, but I took careful notes. Something did not feel right about how freely Patricia was spending HOA money without proper oversight. After the meeting, I approached George Santos again. "George, can I ask you something? Does the board review invoices before paying them?" George looked troubled. "Patricia handles most of the vendor relationships. Monica approves the payments as treasurer, but she is usually just processing what Patricia submits. So no one is independently verifying that the services were actually performed or that the prices are reasonable." "I suppose not." Patricia says it is too time-consuming to micromanage every expense. I thanked George and went home, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I filed a formal request under Arizona HOA law to review the association's financial records. Homeowners had a right to inspect the books, though most people never bothered. Patricia had to comply within 10 business days. When I showed up at the scheduled time to review the records, Patricia made me sit in a small storage room at the clubhouse with boxes of disorganized receipts and bank statements. It took me 6 hours to sort through everything, but what I found was alarming. The landscaping company that received $20,000 for the entrance renovation was called Ashford Landscape Design. Ashford was Patricia's maiden name. A quick internet search revealed that the company was registered to Kenneth Ashford, Patricia's brother. The invoice was vague, listing only design services and installation, without itemizing labor, materials, or hours. I dug deeper and found more irregularities. A painting company that was paid $12,000 to repaint the clubhouse was owned by Patricia's cousin. A pool maintenance contract, worth $18,000 annually, was with a company that listed Patricia's home address as its business address. Over the past 18 months, since Patricia became president, she had steered over $70,000 in HOA contracts to family members and businesses she was connected to. This was not just poor judgment. This was embezzlement and self-dealing, both of which were illegal under Arizona law. I photographed every relevant document with my phone, being careful not to remove anything from the premises. When I finished, Patricia was waiting outside the storage room, her arms crossed. "Find anything interesting?" she asked mockingly. "Very interesting," I replied. "Thank you for making these records available." Her confidence faltered slightly, but she recovered. "I hope you are satisfied. As you can see, every expense is documented and legitimate." I did not respond. I simply nodded and left, my mind already working on what to do next. This was bigger than HOA politics now. This was fraud. That evening I called Marcus Thompson, who was an attorney specializing in real estate law. I explained what I had found, and he agreed to review the documents I had photographed. 2 days later he called me back. "Frank, this is serious. You have documented what appears to be systematic self-dealing and possibly criminal fraud. Arizona has specific laws against HOA board members using their positions for personal financial gain. You need to report this to the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which regulates HOAs, and possibly to the police. Will you help me file the reports?" "Absolutely. This kind of corruption hurts everyone in the community." "Let me draft a complaint for the Department of Real Estate, and we can go from there." Over the next week, Marcus prepared a detailed complaint documenting all the suspicious contracts and payments. We included copies of invoices, bank statements, and business registration records showing the family connections. On May 15th, we filed the complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate and sent copies to the other HOA board members. The reaction was swift and dramatic. Todd Brennan called an emergency board meeting for that Friday night. George Santos contacted me privately to say that he was shocked and had no idea about Patricia's conflicts of interest. Monica Wheeler, who had approved all the payments as treasurer, was reportedly in tears. The emergency meeting was standing room only. Residents were furious, demanding answers and accountability. Patricia arrived late, flanked by a lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Richard Wolfe. "My client denies all allegations of wrongdoing," Richard began before anyone else could speak. "The contracts in question were all legitimately bid and performed. The fact that some vendors have family connections to Mrs. Ashford is coincidental and does not constitute a conflict of interest. Marcus Thompson stood up. That is absurd. Arizona law requires HOA board members to disclose any personal financial interests in vendor contracts and to recuse themselves from approval votes. Patricia did neither. She actively concealed her relationships with these vendors and used her position to direct HOA funds to her own family members. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled homeowner who has been harassing my client for months, Richard countered, pointing at me. I am not disgruntled, I said calmly. I am concerned about the misuse of HOA funds, and I am not the only one. There are 60 witnesses here who are also demanding answers. Todd Brennan cleared his throat. Patricia, I need you to answer this directly. Are you related to Kenneth Ashford of Ashford Landscape Design? Patricia hesitated, then said, He is my brother, but that does not mean anything inappropriate happened. He gave us a fair price. Did you get competitive bids from other companies? I did not feel it was necessary. I know Kenneth does quality work. The room exploded in angry shouts. George Santos called for a vote to remove Patricia from the board immediately. Monica Wheeler seconded it. Even Todd Brennan, who had supported Patricia until now, voted in favor. The motion passed 4-1 with only Patricia voting against her own removal. You cannot do this, Patricia shouted. I will sue the HOA for wrongful termination. You are a volunteer, Marcus reminded her. You have no employment contract. And given that the Department of Real Estate is now investigating, I would suggest cooperating rather than making threats. Richard Wolf hustled Patricia out of the meeting before she could say anything else that might incriminate her. The remaining board members voted to elect Todd Brennan as interim president and to hire an independent accountant to audit all HOA finances from the past 18 months. The audit took 3 weeks and cost the HOA $8,000, but it was worth it. The accountant, a thorough woman named Deanna Foster, found over $90,000 in questionable expenses, most of which went to companies owned by or connected to Patricia and her family. She also found that Patricia had been using an HOA credit card for personal expenses, including restaurant meals, spa treatments, and even a weekend trip to San Diego that she claimed was for professional development. Deanna submitted her findings to the Department of Real Estate, which forwarded them to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. On June 23rd, 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit contacted me for an interview. I spent 2 hours walking them through everything I had discovered, providing copies of all documentation. Detective Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, explained that they were building a case for theft, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. These cases can be tricky, she admitted. HOA boards have a lot of discretion, and proving criminal intent is challenging. But your documentation is excellent, and the pattern here is pretty clear. She was not just exercising poor judgment. She was systematically enriching herself and her family. What happens now? We continue investigating, interview other witnesses, and present our findings to prosecutors. If they agree there is sufficient evidence, they will file criminal charges. That usually takes a few months. I thanked the detectives and went home, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. This had consumed my life for months now, and I was ready for it to be over. But Patricia was not done fighting. In July, I received a letter from Richard Wolf threatening to sue me for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business relationships. The letter demanded that I retract all statements I had made about Patricia, issue a public apology, and pay her $50,000 in damages. I forwarded the letter to Marcus Thompson, who laughed when he read it. This is a classic SLAPP suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. It is designed to intimidate you into silence. Arizona has strong anti-SLAPP protections. If they actually file this, we will get it dismissed and they will have to pay your legal fees. Should I be worried? Not really. Everything you have said is true and documented. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation. This is just posturing. Richard Wolff never filed the lawsuit. Instead, on August 12th, Patricia was arrested at her home and charged with 13 counts of theft, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. The arrest made the local news, and I watched the footage of Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs. Richard Wolff, walking beside her, assuring reporters that she would be vindicated. The criminal case moved slowly through the system, as these things do. Patricia initially pleaded not guilty and demanded a trial. The prosecution offered her a plea deal. Plead guilty to 5 counts of theft and fraud, make full restitution to the HOA, and serve 18 months in county jail followed by 3 years of probation. Patricia rejected it, convinced that she could persuade a jury that her actions were simply aggressive community leadership rather than criminal behavior. The trial was scheduled for January of the following year, but I did not have to wait that long to see justice served. In November, the Arizona Department of Real Estate issued its findings and levied a $50,000 fine against Patricia personally for violating HOA regulations. The department also banned her from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 10 years. Meanwhile, the HOA board, now led by Todd Brennan with Jennifer Ellis replacing Patricia, filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia seeking to recover all the misappropriated funds. Marcus Thompson represented the HOA pro bono, and I served as a key witness. Patricia's assets were frozen pending the outcome of both the criminal and civil cases. By December, facing overwhelming evidence and mounting legal bills, Patricia finally accepted a modified plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 8 counts of theft and fraud, agreed to pay full restitution of $93,000 to the HOA, and was sentenced to 2 years in county jail followed by 5 years of probation. The judge was harsh during sentencing, saying that Patricia had betrayed the trust of her neighbors and abused her position for personal gain. Homeowners associations exist to serve the community, Judge Rachel Martinez said from the bench. When board members use their positions to enrich themselves, they are not just violating the law, they are violating the basic social contract that makes communities function. You will serve your time and make restitution, and hopefully, you will learn that service means putting others first, not yourself. Patricia stood there, her face pale and drawn, no longer the confident, aggressive woman who had threatened me on my own doorstep. She looked defeated and small. Richard Wolff stood beside her, his expensive suit seeming almost ridiculous in the context of such a thorough downfall. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Arizona sunshine. Marcus Thompson caught up with me on the steps. "You did the right thing, Frank." A lot of people would have looked the other way or decided it was not worth the hassle. "I just wanted to prevent the HOA from making a stupid mistake with the playground," I said. "I never imagined it would lead to all this. That is how it always starts. One person asking the right questions. You probably saved your community a lot more money and trouble in the long run." I drove home that afternoon thinking about everything that had happened over the past 9 months. What started as a simple concern about a playground built on a utility easement had uncovered systematic corruption and resulted in criminal convictions. It felt surreal. The playground issue, the catalyst for everything, had been resolved months earlier. After removing the partially constructed equipment from the utility easement, the HOA board identified an alternative location near the clubhouse that had no easement restrictions. They negotiated with the construction company to repurpose the materials and equipment they had already purchased. And by September, a beautiful playground was completed in the new location. It cost an additional $30,000 beyond what had already been spent, but at least the community got something useful out of the disaster. Kids played there every afternoon, their laughter carrying across the neighborhood. Jennifer Ellis brought her 2 children there regularly, and she always made a point to thank me when she saw me. Other neighbors did the same. Some people actually called me a hero, which felt uncomfortable and undeserved. I just asked questions that should have been asked in the first place. The new board operated with much more transparency and accountability. All vendor contracts required competitive bids and board approval. Financial statements were posted online for any homeowner to review. Board meetings became genuine forums for community discussion, rather than rubber stamp sessions for predetermined decisions. But the experience changed me in ways I did not fully expect. I became more involved in the community, volunteering for the HOA Landscape Committee and helping to organize neighborhood events. I realized that good governance required participation, not just criticism. If reasonable people stayed silent and left everything to wannabe tyrants like Patricia, corruption became inevitable. In February, a year after the whole mess started, I was sitting at my desk working when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find George Santos standing there with a plate of cookies. "My wife made these," he said with a smile. "I wanted to thank you properly for everything you did. I know it cost you a lot of time and stress. You voted to remove Patricia and supported the investigation," I reminded him. "You did the right thing too, after you forced the issue." I was ready to just go along with whatever Patricia wanted because I did not want conflict. "You showed me that sometimes conflict is necessary. Sometimes you have to stand up, even when it is uncomfortable." We talked for a while, and George told me that he was considering running for the board again in the next election. He wanted to help maintain the reforms and ensure that nothing like Patricia's reign ever happened again. I told him he had my vote. After he left, I sat on my porch eating one of the cookies and looking at the greenbelt behind my house. The utility easement was clearly marked now, with signs explaining its purpose and restrictions. The power lines hummed softly overhead, carrying electricity to hundreds of homes. Arizona Power and Light had sent a thank you letter to me, expressing appreciation for bringing the easement violation to their attention before it became a more serious problem. Everything had worked out in the end, but it easily could have gone differently. If I had stayed silent, the playground would have been built, and then months or years later, when the power company discovered it, the HOA would have faced an even more expensive disaster. Patricia's corruption would have continued unchecked, draining tens of thousands more dollars from the community. Other board members would have remained complicit through their silence. I thought about all the HOAs across America, thousands of them, each governed by volunteers with varying degrees of competence and integrity. How many Patricia Ashfords were out there right now, using their positions for personal gain? How many communities were suffering under petty tyrants who cared more about control and status than actual service? How many legitimate concerns were being dismissed or ignored because asking questions was seen as troublemaking? The answer was probably depressing, but it also highlighted why individual vigilance mattered. Systems only worked when people held them accountable. Rules only meant something when they were enforced. Communities only thrived when residents cared enough to pay attention and speak up. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Thompson. He was organizing a legal education workshop for HOA board members and homeowners, teaching them about their rights and responsibilities under Arizona law. He wanted to know if I would be willing to share my story as a case study. I typed back yes. In March, I stood in front of about 50 people at the community center in Scottsdale, telling the story of the playground and everything that followed. People took notes and asked questions. Several admitted they had similar concerns about their own HOAs but did not know how to address them. I shared the resources I had learned about: Arizona Department of Real Estate complaints, public records requests, legal consultation options, and the importance of documentation. The key is not to be afraid, I told them. HOA boards work for you, not the other way around. If something seems wrong, ask questions. Demand transparency. Get involved. Most board members are good people trying to do their best, but some are not, and the only way to tell the difference is to pay attention. After the workshop, a young woman approached me. Her name was Rebecca, and she lived in a subdivision in Temp. She was concerned that her HOA president was approving expensive contracts without competitive bidding and had started the same pattern I had discovered with Patricia. What should I do? She asked. Start by requesting the financial records. Document everything. Talk to other homeowners and see if they share your concerns. If you find evidence of wrongdoing, report it to the Department of Real Estate, and do not let anyone intimidate you into staying silent. Rebecca thanked me and left, looking determined. I hoped her situation would not escalate the way mine had, but I was glad she was willing to take action. Over the following months, I heard from several other people who had attended the workshop or heard about my story. A few found legitimate problems in their HOAs and were able to address them through proper channels. Others discovered their concerns were unfounded, but the process of investigating gave them peace of mind and a better understanding of how their communities operated. Either way, increased transparency and accountability could only be positive. By summer, life in Willow Creek Estates had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The playground was always busy with children. The community entrance looked nice with its new landscaping, though nowhere near as extravagant as Patricia's Italian cypress plan. HOA fees remained stable, and the budget was healthy after recovering most of the stolen funds through Patricia's restitution payments. Patricia herself was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Maricopa County. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that her husband had divorced her and moved out of state. Her house went into foreclosure when she could not make the mortgage payments from jail. It was a comprehensive fall from grace, and while I took no pleasure in her suffering, I could not muster much sympathy either. She had brought it all on herself through greed and arrogance. The power company incident that started everything had become something of a legend in our community, and apparently in HOA circles around Phoenix. I occasionally got emails from real estate attorneys or HOA management companies asking about the details. Several used it as a cautionary tale in their training materials. Always check easements before construction. Always get proper approvals. Always verify rather than assume. It seemed obvious in retrospect, but obvious things were easy to overlook when you were caught up in the excitement of a new project or convinced of your own expertise. Patricia had been so certain she knew best that she never bothered to verify her assumptions. That overconfidence had cost her everything. In September, I was working in my yard on a Saturday morning when I noticed someone new moving into Patricia's old house. A family with 3 kids, the parents looking to be in their mid-30s. The woman saw me and waved, walking over to introduce herself. "Hi, I am Francine Morrison. We just bought this place. Are you a neighbor, Frank Quincy, right next door? Welcome to Willow Creek Estates." "Thanks." The realtor mentioned something about drama with the previous owner, but she was vague about details. "Should we be worried about the HOA here?" I smiled. "The HOA is fine now. There were some issues with the previous board president, but that has all been resolved. The current board is transparent and responsible. You will be happy here." "That is good to hear. My husband David and I were worried when the realtor mentioned it. We have had bad experiences with HOAs before." "What kind of experiences?" Francine launched into a story about their previous home in California, where the HOA had tried to fine them for having the wrong color mailbox, then increased the fine every week when they could not find a replacement in the approved color quickly enough. It was petty tyranny of a different sort, but it reminded me why so many people hated HOAs. "The thing is," I said, "HOAs are only as good as the people running them. If you get involved and pay attention, you can help keep things reasonable. Come to the meetings, ask questions, volunteer for committees. That is how you prevent the Patricias of the world from taking over." "Patricia? Was that the previous owner?" I gave her a very brief summary of what had happened, leaving out the most dramatic details. Francine's eyes widened. "Wow. Well, at least you caught it before it got worse." That is what I keep telling myself. We talked for a few more minutes, and I helped her family carry some boxes inside. The kids immediately asked about the playground they had seen near the clubhouse, and I told them it was open to all residents. Their faces lit up, and they begged their parents to take them there later. Watching them drive off toward the playground in their minivan, I felt a sense of contentment. This was what communities were supposed to be about. Families enjoying shared spaces, neighbors helping neighbors, people working together for common benefit. Patricia had lost sight of that, viewing the HOA as her personal fiefdom and the community as a resource to exploit. But communities were resilient. With the right leadership and engaged residents, they could recover from corruption and mistakes. Willow Creek Estates was proof of that. We had been through a crisis, uncovered serious wrongdoing, and emerged stronger and more unified. The playground built on the utility easement, or rather the failed attempt to build it there, would always be the catalyst in my mind. Such a simple mistake, easily avoided with basic due diligence, but it exposed much deeper problems. If Patricia had just called the power company before starting construction, she would have learned about the easement restriction and found an alternative location. The project would have succeeded, and I would have had no reason to dig deeper into HOA finances. But she did not call. She assumed she knew best, dismissed legitimate concerns, and bulldozed ahead with her plan. That arrogance defined everything about her leadership style. She made unilateral decisions, spent money without proper oversight, and enriched herself while claiming to serve the community. The playground was just the most visible symptom of a much larger disease. I sometimes wondered how many other HOAs were operating the same way, with board members who viewed their positions as opportunities for personal benefit rather than community service. The depressing answer was probably quite a few. But I also knew that most HOA board members were honest people trying their best. They volunteered their time, dealt with complaints and conflicts, and worked to maintain their communities with no expectation of personal gain. The difference between good boards and bad ones came down to transparency, accountability, and the willingness of homeowners to stay engaged. When boards operated in secret and homeowners tuned out, corruption became possible. When everything was open and residents paid attention, bad actors got caught quickly. In October, the HOA held its annual meeting and elections. Todd Brennan decided not to run for another term as president, saying he was ready to step back after the stressful year of dealing with Patricia's aftermath. Jennifer Ellis ran for president and won easily. George Santos was re-elected as secretary, and 2 new board members joined. Marcus Thompson and Rebecca, the young woman from the workshop who had successfully exposed and resolved financial irregularities in her own HOA before moving to Willow Creek Estates. It was a strong board, full of people who understood the importance of ethical governance and community service. I felt good about the direction we were headed. During the meeting, Jennifer gave a speech that resonated with everyone in the room. This past year has been challenging for our community, but it has also taught us valuable lessons. We learned that we cannot take good governance for granted. We learned that asking questions is not troublemaking, it is responsible citizenship. And we learned that when we work together with honesty and integrity, we can overcome any obstacle. Willow Creek Estates is stronger now than it was before, and I am honored to serve as your president. The room erupted in applause, and I found myself clapping along with genuine enthusiasm. A year ago, I would have attended this meeting out of obligation, sat quietly, and left without saying a word. Now I was an active participant, someone who cared about the outcome and was willing to work for positive change. After the meeting, several people approached me to chat and thank me again for everything I had done. It still felt strange to be treated like some kind of community hero when I had just been trying to prevent a stupid mistake. But I accepted their gratitude graciously and promised to stay involved. Marcus Thompson pulled me aside as the crowd thinned. "Frank, I want you to consider running for the board next year. We need people like you, people who are not afraid to ask tough questions and hold leaders accountable." "I am not sure I am board material," I said honestly. "I am better at finding problems than solving them." "That is exactly what makes you valuable. Most boards are full of people who want to implement their ideas. We need someone whose instinct is to question whether those ideas make sense before we spend money on them. Think about it." I promised I would, though the idea of voluntarily taking on HOA board responsibilities seemed crazy after everything I had been through. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe the best way to ensure Patricia's mistakes were never repeated was to be part of the system myself, bringing a critical eye and insistence on proper procedures. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much my life had changed over the past year and a half. I had gone from a quiet software engineer who avoided conflict to someone willing to take on an entire HOA board and expose corruption. I had made enemies, faced threats, spent countless hours documenting evidence and attending meetings, and ultimately helped bring a criminal to justice. It had been exhausting and stressful, but also meaningful in a way my work rarely was. Writing code paid the bills, but holding leaders accountable and protecting my community from fraud felt like it actually mattered. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing justice served, and knowing I had played a role in making it happen. I thought about Patricia occasionally, wondering how she was adjusting to life in jail. Had she accepted responsibility for her actions, or was she still blaming me and everyone else for her downfall? Would she emerge from prison a changed person, or would she remain bitter and resentful? I would probably never know, and honestly, it did not matter. She had been caught, punished, and removed from any position where she could hurt people again. That was enough. The playground stood as a permanent reminder of the whole saga, though probably only I saw it that way. To everyone else, It was just a nice amenity where their kids could play. They did not think about utility easements or embezzlement schemes when they pushed their children on the swings. They just enjoyed the moment, which was how it should be, but I would always remember. Every time I saw those bright slides and climbing structures, I would think about the day I watched excavators tearing up the greenbelt behind my house. I would remember the sick feeling in my stomach when I realized the HOA was making a terrible mistake. I would recall the resistance and hostility I faced when I tried to raise concerns. And I would feel grateful that I had the courage to speak up, despite the personal cost. In December, Arizona Power and Light sent representatives to our community to give a presentation about electrical infrastructure and utility easements. They thanked Willow Creek Estates for our cooperation in resolving the playground situation, and used our story as an example of how homeowners and utility companies could work together productively. Sarah Chen, the woman I had first spoken with on the phone, was there and made a point to thank me personally. "You saved everyone a lot of trouble," she said. "If that playground had been completed, we would have had to take legal action to force its removal. It would have been expensive and contentious for everyone involved. By catching it early, you allowed us to resolve things cooperatively." "I was just trying to save my HOA from wasting money," I admitted. "Well, you did that and more." We actually revised our outreach procedures because of this incident. Now, we proactively contact HOAs and local governments when we notice construction activity near our easements, rather than waiting for violations to be completed. Your situation helped us improve our processes. That made me feel good. Positive change rippling out beyond just my community. Maybe other HOAs would avoid similar mistakes because Arizona Power and Light was being more proactive about communication and education. As the year drew to a close, I found myself in a contemplative mood. I had learned so much about human nature, community dynamics, corruption, and the importance of civic engagement. I had discovered reserves of courage and persistence I did not know I possessed. I had made real friends in my neighborhood instead of just having casual acquaintances. I had contributed something meaningful to my community beyond just paying HOA fees and keeping my lawn mowed. On New Year's Eve, several neighbors gathered at the clubhouse for a community celebration. It was a modest affair with snacks, sparkling cider, and conversation. Jennifer Ellis gave a toast as midnight approached. "To Willow Creek Estates and to all of us who call this place home. We have been through challenges this year, but we have emerged stronger and more united. Here is to transparency, accountability, and neighbors who care enough to ask tough questions. And here is to Frank Quincy, who reminded us that one person speaking up can make all the difference." Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride. Francine Morrison, my new neighbor, leaned over and whispered, "I finally heard the whole story about what you did. That took serious guts. Thank you for making this neighborhood a better place." As the countdown to midnight began, I stood surrounded by people who had become genuine friends over the course of this crazy year. Marcus Thompson, who had provided legal guidance and support throughout. George Santos, who had found his own courage to stand up against wrongdoing. Jennifer Ellis, who was leading the community forward with integrity and wisdom. Rebecca, who had taken lessons from my experience and applied them to her own situation. When the clock struck 12 and everyone cheered, I felt genuinely happy and hopeful. Whatever challenges the new year might bring, I knew our community could handle them. We had systems in place now. We had engaged residents. We had leaders who understood that service meant sacrifice, not enrichment. The playground built on the utility easement, the one that never came to be in that location, had taught us all valuable lessons. Sometimes the best projects are the ones you stop before they start. Sometimes the most important question is the one that makes everyone uncomfortable. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. And sometimes, justice actually prevails when ordinary people refuse to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. Patricia Ashford had learned that lesson the hard way, sitting in a county jail cell while the community she tried to exploit moved forward without her. I felt no vindictiveness about her fate, just a quiet satisfaction that accountability had been served. As I drove home that night, past houses decorated with New Year's lights and the playground standing silent in the darkness, I thought about everything Frank Quincy had become over the past year. I was not just a software engineer anymore. I was a homeowner who took civic responsibility seriously. I was a neighbor people could count on. I was someone who would speak up when something was wrong, regardless of the personal cost. That was worth more than any playground, properly sited or otherwise. That was the real infrastructure of a healthy community. People who cared, people who paid attention, and people who acted when action was needed. Willow Creek Estates had that now, built on the ashes of Patricia's corruption, and the lessons learned from a playground that should never have been started. I pulled into my driveway and looked at my house, the home I had chosen 8 years ago because it seemed like a peaceful place to live. It had been anything but peaceful this past year, but I would not trade the experience for anything. I had learned who I was and what I was capable of. I had made a real difference. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. The HOA would continue to function, make decisions, and serve the community. Residents would have concerns and questions. The board would navigate complex issues and balance competing priorities. And I would be there, watching, participating, and ready to speak up if I saw something wrong. Because that was what responsible citizenship looked like. Not staying silent for the sake of avoiding conflict. Not trusting leaders blindly. Not assuming someone else would handle problems. Taking ownership and action when needed, even when it was uncomfortable or costly. The playground built over a utility easement had given me that gift, unintentionally and unexpectedly. It had forced me to find my voice and use it. It had shown me that one person asking the right questions at the right time could change everything. It had proven that justice and accountability were possible, even in the mundane world of HOA politics. As I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, leaving behind the crisp December night, I smiled. I was ready for whatever came next. Willow Creek Estates was in good hands now, including my own. And that playground, the one sitting in its proper location near the clubhouse, would stand as a monument to the power of vigilance and the importance of asking questions. The children who played there would never know the full story of how it came to be, and that was fine. They would just enjoy the swings and slides, make friends, and create memories. That was what communities were supposed to provide, safe spaces for growth and joy, but I would always know. And I would always remember the day excavators started digging where they should not have been, and the journey that began with a simple question. Did anyone check the easements? That question had changed everything, exposed corruption, brought justice, and ultimately made my community stronger. Not bad for a quiet software engineer who just wanted to prevent his HOA from making a stupid mistake. Not bad at all.